Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. Roster drama on the horizon. Edward Gaming making some serious changes to their team going into the rest of the season. The World Cup is on the horizon. The Stage 2 begins after that for all the various regions. But big changes not only due for these teams in China potentially with Edward Gaming on the chopping block, but the other teams that fail to deliver in the other regions also contemplating moves as well. Lots to cover in the VALORANT world. Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate just a little look back at the past really with some of the predictions going into the tournament. All on some level fair predictions, but not really anyone predicted Paper X to make the big run track by track through the tournament. But as Forsaken says, thanks Toronto, great fun. And yeah, looked like it was a great event out there. There was some great pictures coming out of it as well. I thought it was actually really nice to see F&S, and you know, there are obviously plenty of Canadian players as well in Valorant history getting out there. Here was a picture of Forsaken and Tens having a good time as old Tens with a new Red Bull jacket right after signing that partnership relatively recently. Here he was with Sufat as well. So yeah, whether Wolves can take a step up for the rest of the season, we'll see. We know that the Chinese region continues to kind of confound, I would say. When you look at the Chinese teams that turn up to each of the international tournaments, you never really know what you're going to get. They're either going to be terrible or they're going to be fantastic. There is very rarely any middle ground there. Like, you tend to find that when Edward turn up, they are, I mean, usually they're very good when Edward have qualified for the internationals. They are, let's not forget, the reigning world champions, right? Not always the case. When we saw with Trace Esports at the first event of the season, they looked really good domestically, turned up to the international, got slammed. Wolves turned up, did incredibly well. You know, they were not far away from being in the finals, right? Like, they had a very competitive series against the two teams that did eventually win the tournament or make the grand finals of the tournament in Paper X and, of course, Fnatic. But the other Chinese teams, right? I mean, Billy Gaming went home very quickly, as, of course, did XLG. I know they had a bit of drama, but, you know, they were bopped out of the tournament nigh on immediately. So there's still so much potential in the Chinese scene. I think for Wolves, the question really is whether they can back up this performance for the rest of the season and qualify for the World Championship and try and go one better as well, because, you know, we know that Edward Gaming, they looked very competitive internationally, but it wasn't immediate that they were in the position to win the World Championship. We're only a few months on, and that team that's just won the World Championship is nowhere near what it was, not just in terms of results, but also purely in terms of what that roster is going to be going into this year's World Championship, and we'll get into that in the coming minutes. Couple of agent notes yesterday, because after the major tournaments, the Masters in Toronto, they dropped a patch. Not really much changed here. There was a few changes for various agents. Couple of small things mainly, pretty much across the board. Just a couple of, like, these are some examples, really. Audio changes for Omen, audio changes for Brimstone. There are a couple of timing related changes as well for other agents, but, you know, nothing which is going to be particularly game changing, it doesn't seem to me. I guess time will tell. This though is Corrode. So they've added, of course, the new map to the game, and this is where they're all based. I thought it was pretty cool to look at this map, really. Of course, we've got Sunted out of California, Breeze, Fracture, Bind, Pearl, Corrode, Abyss, Ascent, Lotus Haven, Split, and Icebox. Now, pretty interesting to look at this and just kind of consider maybe for a second. I'll just zoom in a little bit more, but this dot on the left-hand side is Sunset, but it's nicely filling the screen now. Corrode is in northern France, and you've got Pearl, of course, in Portugal. You've got Bind set in Morocco. Obviously, like, some of the locations are more obvious, such as Split is obviously in Japan, but I thought it was pretty cool to see this. I guess the question that you might ask is, okay, the next map that they introduce, where's it going to be based on this map? Because they pretty much have a rather global coverage now of where the maps are located. As we say, Bind is in Morocco, so Africa is kind of covered for. There's nothing in Australia. That's one thing to consider. But, you know, there are some maps in the Pacific. I think where there's no maps yet really is South America, right? Like, I think I wouldn't be surprised if the next map we get is, you know, based in Sao Paulo or Brazil or Argentina or something like that anyway. That would kind of be my guess. But yeah, intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Not like it really matters, but because the map design is what's important. But the thing is, you design the map and then you can choose how that works depending on the region that you're going to put the map in and the kind of aesthetics you're going to design. And obviously some maps, if you want a lot of verticality, maybe they have to be based in certain areas of the world to get you the feel that you're going for, right? So thought that was kind of interesting, but intrigued to your thoughts in the comments. But let's talk about what's happening next in the Valorant world, because this is the group schedule, or the group stage match schedule, for the Stage 2 of the Pacific. Week 1 begins on the 15th of July, so you guys can see it right about here on the left-hand side. Week 1, July 15th, July 16th, etc. This is when these games are unfolding, and by the 10th of August, those matches are going to have concluded. But this is what's happening on the left-hand side here. We have the Chinese Stage 2 begins on the 3rd of July. And this is like, I don't really know why it works like this, but they've done it again. And the Chinese region gets back underway in only a few days, right? So Edward played TC on the 3rd of July, whereas an Edward with a rather different roster is likely to be the case as well. However, if we look at the Pacific, they start on the 15th of July. So, you know, we saw their games literally a second ago. They've not quite been put in yet here to the VLR, but like we saw the matches literally right here. This is what they're going to be. They start the 15th. We've seen it in the Americas as well. They start on the 18th. EMEA starts on the 16th. So yeah, again, for some reason, those are starting later. But in some regard, it makes sense because the World Cup is coming up, right? So the Esports World Cup is happening. This is the next real big tournament. There's a $1.25 million prize pool on the line for the Esports World Cup out in Riyadh for the Valorant side. And it's the 8th until the 13th of July. These are the teams that are going to be there. Edward is one of them, right? So, and they have baked that into where they're going to play. Like the Chinese region is going to begin on the 3rd of July and end on the 6th. Then, you know, the guys are going to head out there to the World Cup, right? The teams that qualified, and then they'll be back and playing again. So it's not like Edward have to miss any matches or anything to play the World Cup. They've found a way that they are not going to cross over with one another. But again, it's just interesting that how things end up working. But if you guys aren't familiar, these are the teams that will be there. The top teams that qualified for Masters Toronto and then some additional qualification spots. It was the top 2 per region, and then there was a tournament that determined the other ones. So Gen.G2, XLG, Billy, Fnatic, Heretics, Gen.G, RRQ. Interestingly, of course enough, Wolves aren't going to be there. They didn't qualify through the Chinese Evo A2XACL or whatever. It was Edward and TEC that qualified. Those are going to be the Chinese representatives at the tournament. And then NRG and 100T are the representatives from the Americas. And then you've got, of course, BBL and KC from EMEA, and then PaperX and DRX qualified. So it's going to be really exciting, right? You look at this tournament, all the usual suspects are back in action again. Fnatic are there, PaperX are there. Okay, Wolves aren't there, the 3rd place team, but all the other big names are going to be there. So, you know, excited to see how this one gets on, obviously, in a few days' time. That's really the next big thing to look for before we get to the start of Stage 2. And then as Stage 2 goes on, the playoffs will be there. And then very shortly after that is the World Championship in September. Now, let's talk about the roster drama, because this was put on the Reddit 10 days ago. Tyloo, now, okay, how do we pronounce my fella's name here? I think we're going to call him, there's a couple of things that you can call him. You can either call him just Alphabet Man or something, or you can call him maybe like hfmi or something, or just HFMI. And I might just go HFMI because, okay, it's only 4 syllables. It could be worse. So, yeah, that's this guy's name. And he actually did explain why he called himself that at some point. And basically just wants it to be difficult for people to challenge. I like for difficult people to read. I hope that everyone can read my name letter by letter. I will feel a sense of secret pleasure. The name was specifically created to challenge commentators with its pronunciation. So, you know, you can call him Alphabet Brother or HFMI or whatever you want to do. So, yeah, that's this fella's name. But he's actually quite a good player. And he's played for Tyloo for a bit of time. And about 10 days ago, it seemed like he was spotted on an Edward Gaming headquarters related stream. So this created a bit of buzz around the possibility of maybe that was the change that Edward were considering. And then as of yesterday, we got the confirmation coming out of Tyloo that HFMI will be departing the Tyloo Valorant team. Thank you for the dedication to the team. We wish you the best in the next journey. And they've actually confirmed their replacement already. Yo-Yo's coming in instead for Tyloo. So what's happening? Is this a step for HFMI to be joining Edward Gaming? That seems to be exactly what is happening, right? So Tammy's reporting on it. This is blowing up yesterday as a talking point that they might have their new 5th. Now, we know that Edward have been through a lot of drama. It was only a couple of months ago that the team had some pretty big chaos with Simon, right? Their former 5th player, who they won the World Championship with, let's not forget. Nobody, Kang, of course, another player whose name is kind of interesting, Chichu and Smoggy, and then they had Simon. Then the drama with Simon happened, they got rid of him, they brought in Jenny. That hasn't really worked out. And now, just as I was recording this video, I just refreshed things, and I've seen that actually, yes, it has been confirmed. Edward Gaming have just confirmed the signing of HFMI, but they're calling him something else. He seems like he has a new alias. It's ZJC. Now, in America, you know, it would be ZJC or whatever, which maybe sounds a little bit cleaner, but we're gonna, you know, go ZJC anyway. So that's his new game tag, but it is the same guy. Like, they confirm it here and they say, like, this is his ID, but maybe when he joined Edward, they were like, mate, we ain't having that. We ain't having that on our team page. So this is now actually official. So it looks like Edward have locked this in. Obviously, it was reportedly expected that he was going to replace Jenny in the starting lineup, who replaced Simon back in March. That's now happened. So they're making another alteration here, Edward. Is it going to work out in their favour? I guess we'll see. Durka says, how did they guess my password? Thought that was pretty entertaining. But is Edward going to get back to the top? Because the point has been, let's say with Paper X, they made a great run in the most recent tournament, won the whole thing. That was not expected. And there was a feeling for many that maybe Paper X were done, right? But they've on some level proven that, yeah, if the team ownership and management gives them the freedom to say, look, we still think there's life in this team yet, we're going to stick with the core and we're going to make a run through to win the entire thing. And that's what they did. But of course, to get there, Mindfreak was gone. They made the change. Mindfreak was out. Patman was in, and you know, they made the run. So maybe for Edward, it's a similar story to say, look, we might have to make one change, but we still believe that this core roster with this one additional piece is going to be able to make the run to win the whole thing again. So we'll see. I mean, it would be a crazy storyline if Edward, after struggling this year, make this one move, believe in themselves, make the run back to the World Championship and end up winning the whole thing again back to back. That would be a story of all time. But very well to into your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.